Hi everyone, this is Ellen from Astrology Journal. This is a chart for the Pisces new moon. I want to talk about that. Pisces new moon is happening on February 27th at 7:45 in the evening Eastern time. You can see that the emphasis in this chart is Pisces, and that's really where we need to focus our attention. I want to start actually with Pluto in evolutionary astrology, the version that I learned. There is a method in how you read a chart. I don't usually read it this way, but I want to start there here for this reading. So what you do is you start with Pluto, and the sign that it's in, and read that and really get an understanding of that. And then you look at all the aspects to Pluto, and then you look at the south node and the north node. You look at each of those, understand each of those, and then you look at the ruler, and all the aspects and all that. Then you look at the rulers and understand those, etc. And that's sort of the structure, how you read the chart. I'm just going to start with Pluto. Because I think that's really important to consider. So Pluto is in Aquarius, and we can read Aquarius in this way, in this example, in this case, as humanity and the longing or the desire of the human soul for freedom. And here we have Pisces, and that's the dream for freedom, the dream of humanity for freedom, the vision of humanity for freedom, the imagination, and then using the imagination to create structures, Saturn in Pisces, to imagine structures that support this idea, this vision, this dream, this longing for freedom in the human soul. And we have not yet achieved it. There are still a whole lot of people not free in our world. So there's a lot of grief and a kind of sickness. I've been processing through looking out at the world and just feeling sick. The world would be Saturn. Looking out at the world and feeling kind of sick by what I'm seeing, and I think that's a human response. I think it's a response that maybe this is a layer that in me I haven't processed. I've figured out a way around it, and maybe we just, I just need to stop and process that. And same with the levels of grief that have been coming up, the need to process those. So I remember years ago reading or hearing or something, I don't know who it was or where I saw it or anything, but I remember somebody was talking about, they might have been asking somebody, why haven't we, all the human rights movements that we had in the 20th century, why haven't we actually achieved our goal of, human freedom for everybody? And the answer was essentially, well, we haven't done the work for ourselves. And I don't know, maybe I didn't read that. Maybe that's my own answer. But that's what I remember. And it's like, well, we haven't done our own work. Each individual has to do their own work. And until that happens, all we can ever do is superficial change. Superficial change to the structures, for example, Saturn again, structures. And so my feeling is, it's not about scrambling out of grief. It's not about trying to get our way out of grief. It's about feeling the grief so it can ground, so that we're no longer, or it no longer has power over us. And it's about feeling the sickness, right? So it no longer has power over us. And I'm not a teacher, I'm not like a spiritual teacher. I'm not an enlightened being. I don't have any final answers. I'm just sharing with you what I am coming to for myself and what I've been coming to for some time. So each time some emotion comes up and I figure out a way to feel it, I feel like I know myself better. I feel like I return to myself just a little bit more. And then that makes way for the next layers of feelings to come up, emotions to come up, and being able to process those. And for a while, I wondered if I was like really screwing up, because I'm like, it's just the next level that's coming up. And I think it's just it runs deep. If you're an old soul, it runs deep, and there's a lot to process. So that's my personal feeling about it. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. I think we're never going to really truly pull ourselves up out of freedom until we learn how to really process the sickness and the grief and really reckon with the structures that we've created and what they create in the world, and what we create through them. So I want to talk about, too, that idea of what we create through them. So we are all imprinted by these structures. We are all influenced by them conditioned by them, etc., in ways that we may not even fully understand. One example I want to give, it's one I've been hearing, and I don't mean to be pointing fingers at anyone. I just want to, it was just something so striking to me, and I would have probably agreed with it, except I was listening to it, I guess, with different ears or something. But this one argument about the progressive argument, and I tend to align more with progressive than conservative, but I don't really align with anyone, I would say, right now. But I am more, I have more, I don't know, I relate more to the progressive side, I guess I can say that. But anyway, this argument is that, the roundup, the ICE immigration roundups that are happening, the argument on the left is, we want to be kind. We want to support the immigrants. We want to be kind to them. We want to show them we care or whatever, because they're the people who do the work for us. And I think that we really need to step back and think about that statement, because what we're saying is we agree to a world where some people are doing the work that we don't want to do, so that our lives can be a little cushier, our lives can be a little easier. And I'm not sure I'm not sure. That is not the structure that I imagine that would be consonant with structures that were fully in full support of, of freedom for all humans. And, so if that makes sense, I don't know how to say it any better than that. I don't know if I already said this. I just want to say it very clearly. I'm not a teacher. I'm not an enlightened being. I'm just a person on my journey sharing my perspective, what I'm seeing. So this may or may not be, my perspectives may or may not be true, but this is just what I'm coming through, that's coming through my experience, and I'm sharing it. So so to me, that statement is a subtle way in which we just tacitly accept that the structures are a certain way, and they work for us, and so we're okay maybe with some people being, working for us and working their way up, giving them an opportunity to work their way up, pull themselves up by the bootstraps, all that kind of stuff. And I think we need to question all of those things. I happen to be a grandchild of immigrants, and they happen to work as servants, so it may just be in my DNA. I'm sensitive to it. I don't know how my grandparents thought about it. I never knew my grandfather. I don't know how my grandmother thought about it. But for me, I have a natural kind of reaction to it. Mercury is servant. It rules Virgo. South Node is in Virgo. So this may be something that we need to contend with as a humanity. Our tendency, service, Virgo is about service, which I think is a part of a healthy, free human society, but that is not the same as servant. And so I feel like we are always bending things as a humanity. Our structures are always bending things to the lowest common denominator. And what I think we want to imagine into being, and so that we can create them and make them into being, and people are already doing that, is how do we create structures that bend to the highest common denominator? You know what I mean? That make things, truly possible for people. And not just palliate, not just, pacify people so that, things can keep going as they're going, but really radically transform our structures. So again, just that's my personal opinion, personal belief. I'm not really, I have my opinions because I live in this world. I wouldn't call myself a political person, but it's hard not to live in this world and not have opinions about things, especially if you're living in the world the way I am, where I'm relying on, help from people. So anyway, so that's something to think about. And so we can look out at the world and we can say this is wrong and that's wrong and how can this be happening, or how can that be happening, or we may be really happy with what's happening. So in the first case, we might want to ask ourselves, how are we participating, in our day-to-day lives? What are the assumptions that we're operating on that are actually part of this structure, that are perpetuating this structure? And I know that it's really hard to retract from the structure. So I'm not trying to guilt anyone. I'm not trying to blame anyone. I'm not trying to anyone. But until we really do this work, it's very, very hard. And guilt, by the way, Saturn, ruler of Capricorn, this is about guilt. Guilt, in my opinion, is perhaps the single most major obstacle to getting beyond where we are to being able to really realize true freedom, because guilt prevents us from really, we tend to go to blame if we were behaving in ways that we were taught to behave, and it turns out we realize that's harmful, it's not a good way to be or something like that. Then we can get wrapped up in guilt, and guilt isn't going to get us there. We need to understand, we need to get beyond that, understand that we're worthy, that we were affected by systems and structures, conditioned, taught in ways that, were kind of out of alignment with what's really true. And my experience is, as you process the guilt, you start to get in touch with who you really are, and you realize that, the structures are something different from you. It's not about not taking responsibility. It's a very subtle thing that I'm trying to say. But guilt is a huge obstacle in my experience. And so we tend to put a block up, and we don't want to go beyond that, because guilt is very painful. And it's a horrible experience if you've been doing something that's actually been harmful for someone, and then to realize it's been harmful and you didn't know that. It's a very painful experience. So anyway, so I'm just kind of going on. I have a lot to say about this chart, apparently. So we have the North Node in Pisces. So the North Node is our evolutionary trajectory, imagining, envisioning, dreaming structures that are truly enlightened. Aquarius would be enlightened, truly enlightened, that truly are fostering of and caring for and nurturing of the highest human potential, and and supporting each person and realizing their unique genius and gift. And I talk about this all the time. That's my personal belief. That's what I think is possible for humanity. Venus is interesting. Venus is not retrograde in this chart, but it's just started its station. Venus is stationing a few hours after this new moon. Venus is stationing retrograde, and then on March 1st it'll turn retrograde. Venus's values, its security, its trust, it's all that kind of stuff. So what do we really value as a humanity, as individuals? What do we really value as human individuals, and also as a human collective? What do we really value? And to me, that goes back to the aspiration of the human soul. That goes back to the aspiration of the human soul, of the longing, the desire for freedom. That's the ultimate value. Another thing I want to talk about is this idea of deception. And so Pisces can be about deception, and I think there's just layers of deception in our world. Right now it's really challenging to ferret that out, and so be aware of that. In terms of Mercury and communication, it's worth considering that truth. And I'm thinking about a time when I was young, one of my first jobs, I was working as an underling, and the management wanted us to try something out. And I argued for, why don't we try it out? Because it was presented as try it out. We'll all come back together. We'll have a conversation about it and see if we're okay with it. I just trusted Venus, in my very naive way. I have Pluto and Uranus in Virgo in the 12th house. I tend to be very naive. I have Neptune in the 2nd. It's the point of a kite. Huge naivete. I tend to be exploited very easily. Anyway, but I used my voice to support management and having us do that. I was young. I was new to the whole system and structure. I didn't understand the deception yet. And anyway, so we did it for a while, and we came back, and it was really clear that our answer was no, and it didn't matter. They got us doing it. That was it. We were doing it from then on out. So I will never use my voice again in that way. I'm not, if I do not have clarity about, everything when it comes to something like that, I'm not going to use my voice. I'm very much more cautious about using my voice now. That was a really significant experience for me. So how we use our voice, do we really understand what's at play? Do we really understand what's going on? So that's something to think about. There's an interesting relationship between Pluto and Jupiter. They're 130 degrees apart, and that is not an official aspect. But I keep coming across it in charts, and I keep being like, I don't know what that is, I'm going to ignore it. But I thought about it today, and the 130 degrees is 90 degrees plus 40 degrees. And 90 degrees is a square, and 40 degrees is a novile. The square is challenge, and the novile is the promise. So the promise that comes after the challenge. If we meet the challenge, it's the promise that comes. In this situation, this is a waxing 130 degree aspect. I don't know what you would call it. So the waxing 90 degree aspect falls at 0 degrees of Cancer, and that's that idea of birth, or pregnancy and birth. And so the challenge is carrying the dream, the vision, the baby, right? And then the promise is, so if we add 130 degrees, so that gets us to 10 degrees of Leo. The promise is the light at the end of the tunnel, you could say. 40 degrees gets us at 10 degrees of Taurus, which is our values and our worth and our gifts and our talents and our resources and survival and security and all that kind of stuff. So if we carry the vision, to term, and are able, and go through the birth process, those are the challenges. If we do that, then perhaps we'll experience safety, security, and we'll be able to foster our gifts and all that kind of stuff. I feel like I'm a little shaky on that, this part of it. But what I feel strong on is this idea of that if, the pregnancy and birth process, they are processes, they take time, and we have to show up for those every step of the way. We can't just be at the baby is born or the project is born. We actually have to go through that process, and it can be a challenging process. But if we go through it and we get to the other side of it and we are able to go through the birth, then there's this promise that is birthed, this light that is birthed. That's the Leo part, this light that is birthed. So that's something to think about. And the Sabian symbol for the moon is something about an aviator in the sky, something like that. Linda Hill, if you look at her website, you would look at 9 degrees of Pisces on her site. Usually when you look at a Sabian symbol, you would look up you would round up a degree to 10 degrees. But she does it differently. Anyway, the Sabian symbol for 9 Pisces on her site, otherwise 10 Pisces, is an aviator, like flying in the clouds or something like that. And what she talks about is this idea of not getting distracted, staying the course, and there's a lot of distraction. So if we're going to reach our highest potential, we have to sort of know what our values are, know what our gifts and talents are. This is that Venus piece. And we have to then apply ourselves to, day-to-day Mercury here, ruler of Virgo, South Node Virgo, day-to-day work in service to this dream that is our highest potential and our unique permutation of that. And not getting distracted, that's a big piece of it. So Venus, the Sabian symbol for Venus is, I think it's a president of a country, so that's really relevant in terms of this staying the course and not getting distracted, because any president of any country is going to do what they're going to do. Any administration is going to do what they're going to do, and we can get kind of lost in the drama of all of that, lost in the whatever is going on and all of that, and lose our way. Or the drama would be the sun, or we can stay the course of our dreams and our visions, and do the work of realizing our highest potential. Jupiter, by the way, I wanted to also talk about Jupiter, Truth and Lies in Gemini, the messages that come, how we communicate, but also the messages that come to us. So learning, what's true and what's not true. Our values, being clear on our values can help us with that. Venus is in Aries, that's the head, using our head, being clear on our values. To be able to sort through the messages that come our way, and that will help us stay on course, that sort of thing. I'm just noticing that there is this this is not an official pattern, but you can see that I highlighted this triangle pattern. There's a keen to Sile, or you could say keen to Chile. I hear a lot of people pronounce it that way. Pointing to the South Node, so a keen to Scilly here, or I like saying keen to Sile. And then there's a septile aspect here, both pointing to the South Node. So it's suggesting that there's some pressure here, and maybe that's around this idea of, our daily lives, pressure around our daily lives, pressure around this idea of servant versus service, and this going back, I think, deep into the human psyche, Pluto human psyche. The septile is something, something that is, kind of a karmic fruition. A lot of times people talk about the septile as being a higher spiritual dimension. I just think of it as fate or destiny, pointing to the South Node. So something from our past coming to fruition, perhaps in some way. And this is together with Ceres. Ceres is, one of the earth goddesses, and she has a lot to do with grief. So it may be, I don't know, I don't actually know. This is one of those things that have to get closer to the time. The keen decile is with Venus, so it's Venus to the South Node. So something to do with our values, our worth, our sense of worth, really, really important when it comes to the difference between service and servile, or service and servant. Our sense of worth, our values, our gifts and our talents, money, banks, all that kind of stuff. But our sense of security, our roots in the ground. It rules Taurus, our roots in the ground, and then balance and imbalance as its ruler of Libra and our relationships, our one-on-one relationships. So this is the last lunation before the eclipse season. So in March we'll have a full moon and then a new moon, both of which are eclipses. So this is the new moon leading to the full moon eclipse. Okay, that's all for now. I'll be back with more later. Bye.